Kia ora, and thank you very much, Michael, for reminding me how long I've been around. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning. I'd like to acknowledge Madam Wu, my parliamentary colleagues, the Right Honourable John Key, the Right Honourable Helen Clark, and Phil Goff, of course. It is indeed my pleasure to join you today for this China Business Summit, my first as Minister for Trade and Export Growth, as well as Minister for Agriculture, and to have the opportunity to speak to you about the New Zealand-China trade relationship. I'd like to join the Prime Minister in firstly thanking the organisers, especially Fran O'Sullivan and Michael Barnett. The summit is now a celebrated fixture on the annual event calendar, and the stage has certainly been set for a rich set of discussions over the course of today. Let me echo too the Prime Minister's comment that New Zealand's relationship with China is one of our most significant. Everyone in this room understands the extraordinary success story of our bilateral trade, propelled by the free trade agreement we signed in 2008. Thank you, Phil. Pre-COVID-19, two-way goods and services trade totaled more than $33 billion annually. Ours is a trade relationship that is complementary and from which both sides benefit. I have been fortunate to have been involved in it as Minister of Agriculture and now as Minister of Trade and Export Growth. In that time, I've worked with both my ministerial counterparts in China and with New Zealand exporters, especially in the primary industries. And although the advent of COVID-19 has disrupted so much, in fact, our bilateral goods trade has held up very well. New Zealand exports by value were down less than 1% in 2020 when compared to 2019, itself a record year for our trade. Of course, individual sectors have had different experiences. Dairy, our largest export to China, grew in 2020 despite COVID-19. Others, including forestry and seafood, were hit particularly hard early on by the challenging market conditions that COVID helped create. But they are recovering well. By contrast, our main services exporters continue to face huge challenges due to the ongoing border and market restrictions COVID-19 has necessitated. I refer in particular to the international education and tourism sectors referred to by the Prime Minister, for which China was an important market prior to COVID-19. And I want to acknowledge those of you in the room who are impacted by this. New Zealand has long been a nation of innovators. And through the pandemic, I have been impressed and inspired by the many ways in which New Zealand businesses have adapted. In China, we've seen New Zealand businesses pivoting to e-commerce channels as a way of ensuring their products get to their customers. And in the absence of travel, we've seen real investment by New Zealand businesses in maintaining their connection to market, whether that be over digital platforms, through their local business partners, or the in-market New Zealand Inc. team. It was excellent to see, for example, so many New Zealand companies participating in the China International Import Expo in Shanghai last November. I recently spoke to a range of Chinese-based business people at a virtual New Zealand Business Roundtable China event and was impressed by how they have adapted to the challenges of COVID and are managing the ongoing disruption to supply chains. They remain optimistic about the Chinese market, and a number of them spoke about launching new products and the ongoing innovation work they are doing to meet the challenges in Chinese consumer preferences. A number of our companies have used the pandemic as an impetus for positive change. Take, for example, Les Mills International. With the gym industry one of the hardest hit, Les Mills used the disruption as an opportunity to accelerate its digital initiatives. One of these was the creation of a new online instructor training program, which saw the company able to train 2,800 instructors in one online session, many of whom participated from their homes. Les Mills also launched a WeChat mini program to provide free workouts and other content allowing Chinese consumers holed up in their apartments to stay healthy. They also launched paid live stream classes. It's clear that the company is now well placed to take advantage of the steep uptick of both in-home exercising and live streaming. Then there's Magic Memories. You might be surprised to hear about a New Zealand attraction photography business securing a big win in the midst of COVID-19 when travel and visits to attractions are restricted. But that's just what Magic Memories did when it successfully secured a strategic partnership with Merlin Entertainment Group in Asia in November 2020. Without any staff in China and with the help of NZTE, Magic Memories was able to successfully deliver projects in 9 sites on time and set up a presence in Shanghai in January this year. Well done. And then there's Fisher & Paykel Appliances, who at the peak of the pandemic successfully signed 4 new strategic partnerships with some of China's top real estate developers. This meant that they could deliver full kitchen solutions to over 2,000 new Chinese families. Taking advantage of the significant opportunity in China's home development sector, Fisher & Paykel continues to expand into luxury retail with the opening of up to 10 Fisher & Paykel stores per year planned through to 2024. Separately, of course, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare has continued to supply much-needed respiratory products globally throughout the pandemic. These are just some great examples of our companies working well despite the current challenges. This government is also investing in its international relationships during these challenging times. I'm pleased that New Zealand and China have maintained our regular engagement and dialogue, even in the absence of high-level visits. Personally, I have valued the opportunity to connect recently with my Chinese ministerial counterpart, Commerce Minister Wong Wentao. In that discussion, we took stock of how our bilateral trade was faring in the COVID-19 context and exchanged views on issues relating to APEC and the World Trade Organization. It was good to connect with Minister Wong so soon after he took up his portfolio. During that same engagement, Minister Wong and I also signed virtually the upgrade of our bilateral free trade agreement. The upgrade modernises our existing FTA by updating the rules underpinning our trade to ensure they remain fit for purpose. Already, 98% of New Zealand's current goods exports by value have duty-free access to China under the 2008 Free Trade Agreement. The upgrade builds on that further with new goods and services market access and trade facilitation measures. In terms of goods, the upgrade will result in tariff-free access for 99% of New Zealand's nearly $3 billion of wood and paper trade to China. In services, we have new commitments across a number of sectors and provisions to protect New Zealand's future competitive advantage by ensuring we benefit from additional commitments China may make to other trading partners in the future. The upgrade will also add a number of new chapters to the FTA in areas like e-commerce, government procurement, and the most ambitious environment chapter commitments in any of China's FTAs. We look forward to the upgrade coming into force. Another highlight in terms of the architecture of our trading relationship was the signature in November of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. Both New Zealand and China are parties to this agreement, along with 13 others from our region. Collectively, the RCEP membership accounts for nearly a third of the world's population and over half of New Zealand's exports. Separate to these big announcements, New Zealand agencies have continued to work closely with Chinese counterparts to support the continuation of trade as much as possible despite COVID-19. We've kept up the formal bilateral talks that underpin the relationship, from trade to agriculture and education. And we've continued to cooperate in areas of shared interest, for example, in maintaining supply chains for essential goods and on ways to improve the business environment. Our New Zealand Inc. team up in China work alongside New Zealand businesses every day, working to resolve any issues as they arise and providing information and support. Because issues do arise, as you would expect in a trading relationship of this size, and in a market as multifaceted as China. And in the past year, both importers and exporters have also faced the added challenges of disruption caused by COVID-19 globally. This includes navigating shifting requirements and expectations relating to management of the global risk posed by COVID-19, whether that be at the border or in our exporting premises. Government agencies will continue to work closely with both businesses and their Chinese counterparts on these issues. All these efforts contribute to the government's trade recovery strategy, which aims to put exporters at the centre of New Zealand's economic recovery from COVID-19. The strategy has four main areas of focus. Firstly, we're retooling exporter support by providing tools, support and market intelligence to businesses, especially those that may not be able to be physically present in the market due to travel restrictions. Secondly, we're reinvigorating international trade architecture. This means supporting international trade rules and organisations which have become more important than ever. We're working with China and others to reform and strengthen the WTO to ensure it remains effective and can contribute to solving contemporary global challenges. We're continuing negotiations on important new trade agreements, including free trade agreements with the European Union and the United Kingdom. And we are advancing concerted, open, plurilateral initiatives, ambitious trade outcomes negotiated by small groups, and which will be open to all who can meet the standard to join. Recent examples include the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, DEPA, and the work we're doing on the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability, ACTS, as we call it. We're refreshing key trade relationships, including to ensure our businesses have many overseas market options. Diversification has long been a key principle of New Zealand's trade policy, and government will continue to encourage all businesses to consider their market concentration and exposure risks. Here I want to echo comments made recently by my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, that New Zealand must avoid over-reliance on any one trading partner. It is important to our long-term economic resilience and well-being that we do so. And finally, we're looking to take the lessons of COVID-19 to build New Zealand's future resilience against economic shocks. This strategy is important for New Zealand because although China is recovering quickly in economic terms from the pandemic, global economic outlook for our exporters remains challenging. We'll need to be deliberate and targeted in our response. The Prime Minister has outlined this morning some of the priorities we will pursue as APEC hosts this year, including with China. New Zealand is working with the 20 other APEC economies to lead a collaborative economic response to COVID-19. For example, we're wanting to ensure we have resilient supply chains for essential medical products related to the ongoing pandemic. The deep interlinkages between the APEC economies mean that we all have a stake in each other's successful return to growth and the rebuilding of trade and the movement of people. At the same time, we need to bear in mind other enduring benefits that economic cooperation can create as we recover from COVID-19. These include progress on sustainability, ensuring widespread adoption of digital tools to drive productivity, and creating inclusive plans that create opportunities for Indigenous people and women. Together, we can lift each other up and grow again. Without any doubt, APEC is important to New Zealand business. Working together, With other APEC member economies over many years, we've improved the trade environment in the Asia Pacific. The streamlined import and export processes promoted by APEC, for example, means exports take less time to get to where they're going and at a lower cost. This comes through clearly in the figures. Trade between APEC economies is now 8 times greater than it was in 1989. 14 of New Zealand's top 20 export markets are APEC members, including the 3 largest economies in the world, the United States, China and Japan. For New Zealand, almost 3/4 of our exports go to APEC member economies. It's no coincidence that all of our free trade deals are centred around APEC economies, as this reflects the understandings and the relationships that we've built through APEC. Finally, a word on travel. I spoke earlier about how impressed I have been with the way in which New Zealand businesses have adapted to COVID-19 realities, including limitations on travel. But we all acknowledge that impersonal relationships are critical underpinnings of business success. The government recognises that safe international connectivity is fundamental to economic, cultural and social well-being of all New Zealanders. However, managing the relaxation of our borders will need to be done very carefully to preserve the health outcomes that we have achieved through our COVID response strategy. Vaccines, vaccine certification, testing and managed isolation and quarantine are all tools that we can manage risk. These are complex issues to work through for any governments, including New Zealand and China, and so they will take some time. For now, let me join you in looking forward to the day when we can travel freely and safely again. You can be sure that our government will do all it can to get us to this outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by reaffirming the government's commitment to New Zealand trade relationship with China, an important market for us. And I want to pay tribute to all of you in attendance today for the valuable contributions you make in this relationship and to New Zealand more broadly. As the Prime Minister said, government is here to support you as much as we can as we navigate these complex times together. Shishi. Thank you.
Minister, I'll start with a question of my own, and I can see that the board has been busy as you've been talking, but one of the things that we've noticed has been inspections in the China market. We saw it happen with fish, we've seen it happen with apples. I think the next sector that's sitting there and concerned would be the meat sector. And I guess my question is, do you have the same concern? Do you think that the meat industry should be concerned?
Look, we've accepted that audits and certification of our processing plants is a part of the trade relationship. We have had 6 audits recently of apple establishments, both on orchard and some of the pack houses. And prior to that, of course, we've had some issues with seafood plants. There are no audits planned in the near future, as far as we know. These are tricky areas where obviously we don't have the ability to bring people into the country. It's been virtual audits. There are obviously challenges around that. So we are concerned that we get across the reality that we do not have COVID in the community, that our systems have been robust, that what we've done in the last 12 months to process our food, I think has been first class and acknowledged across the world. We just have to ensure that the audit systems, when they do return, accurately reflect what goes on in our premises, be it meat, dairy, or across the horticultural sectors.
I'm going to go to the board. Anonymous. China is the largest trading partner for many countries around the world. In this context, what, if anything, makes New Zealand-China relationship special?
Well, clearly we have a relationship that goes back many, many years, but since 2008 that trade relationship has ramped up significantly, and it's our biggest trading partner, a very important relationship, and we have to respect that. As the Prime Minister said, we won't agree on all issues, and we keep separate the trade and economic objectives of both our countries from other issues that may arise from time to time. I think we'll continue to build what is an amazing opportunity for us into a big and growing and vibrant market.
I think you said in your speech that the relationship is significant. Where are the areas that you would expect to see growth, and as a part of that, do we have too many eggs in one basket?
Well, look, I ran a small tourism business before getting into politics, and I think 40% of all our trade came from one bus company. It makes you a little bit exposed. I think anyone would understand that reality. That's why we're, working to build trade relationships with other markets, leave the doors open. But ultimately, those decisions are made by businesses as to where they place their products. China is a huge opportunity. It has been. We welcome that. But we, obviously say to businesses, you should keep your portfolio, diverse. We are facing and will face disruptive times, I guess, into the future. And so that's those companies that have had a diversified portfolio for a number of reasons, have done quite well. And obviously those connected with e-commerce have done better.
Where do you see the areas for growth, and what opportunities for SMEs do you see?
I mean, the acknowledgement of SMEs in all of our trade negotiations has been important. And so e-commerce, again, an area that offers up good opportunity, direct to market, direct to consumer. It's hard to know how large the opportunities are in a market like China or in growth across other parts of the economy.
A question from Stephen Jacoby. Is New Zealand prepared to engage with China to develop greater understanding of CPTPP, given China's interest in that agreement?
Yes, we are. We welcome their engagement on CPTPP, as we do any other economies that want to come on board and I guess, meet the requirements of what is a high-value agreement.
From David from Comvita, the UK has designated exporters as frontline staff. Will New Zealand follow that lead?
We have worked through very carefully a prioritisation for vaccine rollout. We haven't considered that at this point, but it's one of the things that perhaps we can look at as we move down the track. We would like to see the movement of people into market as quickly as possible, but sometimes you have to realise that in going into market, it's not always easy to see people directly, and I think even as politicians, some have travelled, but not had that interpersonal engagement that they had expected, because the challenges across the world with COVID are still very significant.
Minister, when will exporters get vaccinated, and once vaccinated, will we be able to get up to China to see our customers and return home without going into MIQ?
As soon as possible. I think at times I think that perhaps they'll be given the vaccine and sent offshore quite quickly. But look, the reality, we have to work through this very, very carefully. And I would say MIQ space and I guess, the virtual engagement that we have, these are all factors that will be considered.
There's a question there about you attending the 4th China International Import Expo in Shanghai.
Possibly. I would certainly like to get there. We're very conscious that we're negotiating with the EU and the UK, and there will, at a point of negotiation, be a really important requirement for interpersonal engagement, minister to minister, to get those things over the line. And for events like that, if possible, I'm sure I'll be in attendance.
A question from Trevor Johnston. COVID-19 has been very well controlled within mainland China. Are there active discussions with China on a travel bubble between New Zealand and major mainland China cities?
There are not active discussions, but clearly, it's one of the big markets that we would like to make progress on. But it is a complex area, and we will be cautious because of the incredible investment that New Zealanders and your businesses have made to get us to where we are. We don't want to put that at risk unnecessarily.
One of the questions that I was asked to put to you goes back to forestry, and I think some of the work that was done a couple of years ago sort of showed a disruption to the New Zealand timber sector because of our exports to China. And if I have a look at Australia, their exports of timber are reducing. There's a strong suggestion that there will be a reduction from Russia. Are we going to do anything to either lift our exports, which would further disadvantage the domestic market, or what action will we take?
Look, there's still uncertainty about what Russia might do. The profile of logs going from Australia is not the same as that going from our country here. And indeed, the profile of logs being exported is not that which automatically meets the requirements of our local processors. So they're not directly interlinked. There are some claims, of course, that we've had a squeeze on supply here. That was in part due to processing over COVID that was stopped here. So there is a bit of catch-up. We believe that supply locally will meet demand soon, but the 35 million tonnes of logs that we will be harvesting pretty much every year until 2030, I guess still a large portion of those will be exported, and most of the local processors will have access to a reasonable number of logs.
A question here from Hugh Holland. Going forward, how does the New Zealand government view the digital RMB and its role in the China-New Zealand trade relationship?
I guess people who could make it's one of the emerging realities of trade and of commerce. We haven't made a judgment on that other than to keep our eyes and minds open to that. It's an interesting one that I think the whole world, the monetary system across the world, will be watching very carefully.
Question here. It says, I've just finished a live stream to China 55 shopping festival. The consumer trend is caring about the carbon footprint. How can we adapt to this strategy?
Look, it's one of the things that really is a hook for us in negotiations with the EU. As the Prime Minister said, we are looking to include agriculture in our emissions trading system, that is to do our bit for global emissions reduction. We understand, of course, this is every country, including China, is concerned about this, and so I guess the more we can do and show that we're playing our part, the more likely we are to connect with the consumers in market. And that, I think, over time will be a huge advantage for us as a country, producing food that will be low or next to zero carbon as we roll out the technologies.
Question here from Frankie Wang. Minister, could you please outline how we are tracking following the recent FTA upgrade with China? How are we making progress in this regard in the long term?
Look, we're going well, and we're so not too far from implementation and ratification of those. We have to make some changes, a few changes in law, but we're getting there, and so we're moving as quickly as possible on that.
From Anonymous, are you asking businesses who are working solely with China to start looking elsewhere?
Not at all.
No.
I mean, it's government's job to open the doors to trade opportunities, which is what we're doing with the EU and the UK. We're not asking them, we're just saying that, as any business, you should take a look at a balanced portfolio of export.
If you refer to our economy, you can often look at it and say it's not very diversified in its relationship. And I'll go back to my question from earlier on. Are you taking steps to help diversify? Is there any way that we can assist the SME sector, for example, in accessing China?
Look, one of the things that NZTE has done over the last 12 months is got out there and write a lot of in-market reports about opportunities that exist, both within China but also elsewhere around the world. So all we can do is provide as much evidence and information as possible to exporters who will ultimately make that call themselves. So we're not encouraging or discouraging, we're just stating the facts that, diversified portfolio across your business or across sectors is probably a smart way forward.
From Jerry Clode, the Minister mentions 100% Chinese-owned Fisher and Paykel. What is the role of Chinese business with New Zealand connection in building and deepening trade relationships?
Well, obviously, you would hope it's a very positive one, and a good understanding of the market is a huge advantage, and we have a lot of Chinese investment, and we welcome that across the business sector, and that is a connection to market should give those companies an advantage.
Minister, I'm going to stop it there. I've still got a board full of questions, as you can see. I think the essence of what we're saying, it goes back to where you started. It's a significant relationship that we have with China. It's one that's building, and the companies in New Zealand are definitely showing that they can change how they operate in China, and that's making a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join with me in thanking the Minister for his address and Q&A session this morning. Minister, thank you.